cases, and to look back on these 40 years of work that Lambda Legal has done and 20 years here in the Midwest. So as we pause for a moment to think about how much you have done with your support, we'd also like to honor two women, both of whom spent more than a decade with us, and who crafted a legacy that has been the foundation for the ongoing work that we continue to do today. Heather Sawyer. Even before Heather Sawyer, the amazing Heather Sawyer, even before she joined Lambda Legal, when she was a mere baby lawyer, she defended a Chicago man's right to work for the Boy Scouts of America and won a favorable ruling from the Chicago Commission on Human Relations. She joined Lambda Legal in 1996, and she eventually rose to the position of senior counsel. Her work in a groundbreaking Supreme Court case helped establish that people with HIV enjoy protection from discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act. She successfully resolved numerous cases involving employment discrimination against people simply because of HIV. She also defended a man with HIV who was convicted of assault with a deadly weapon simply for spitting at a police officer. Heather also worked quietly to obtain accurate identity documents for transgender people. In addition, as we look forward to winning the freedom to marry here in Illinois, and as we celebrate the 4th anniversary of our victory in Iowa, know that Heather laid the groundwork for both of those achievements. Some of the couples in our Illinois marriage lawsuit, Eileen, worked with Heather 10 years ago as this lawsuit was first being planned. These couples were so patient, they waited for the right time when this lawsuit could be filed, and Heather was a large part of creating those relationships and doing that initial work. She did the same in Iowa. She was at the heart of both cases, and we owe her our success. Fortunately, although Heather left us to move to Washington, D.C., she did not leave our movement. She remains one of the most revered civil rights advocates in the country in her new role as Minority Counsel for the House Judiciary Committee. Heather is lead counsel on the Respect for Marriage Act, the bill that would repeal the so-called Defense Marriage Act. And it was also Heather who authored the amicus brief in Windsor on behalf of 212 members of Congress, arguing that DOMA should be struck down. The Honorable Patricia Loeb. Pat opened up Lambda Legal's Midwest office 20 years ago with a gift generously left to Lambda Legal by Lon Foster. Although she has left us to join the bench, she's also left us a legacy. One of Pat's early landmark cases you heard about earlier this evening was the case on behalf of Jamie Nabosny, who was so brutally bullied and abused by fellow students that he had to have surgery because he'd been kicked repeatedly in the stomach. The school did nothing and argued that it was obligated to do nothing because the abuse targeted Jamie because of his sexual orientation. Pat won an appeals court victory, establishing that a public school can be held accountable for failing to stop anti-gay abuse. It was a landmark ruling, and we still cite to it all the time. Pat also protected student speech rights at public universities by successfully fighting the efforts of anti-gay students at the University of Wisconsin who sought to defund LGBT student groups. And she remains a leading light among family scholars around the country. Her fingerprints are in countless cases, not just in the Midwest, but nationwide. Pat is the person responsible for the rules of law in many states that we now take for granted, that a person's sexual orientation is irrelevant to their fitness to parent their children. But perhaps Pat's greatest legacy is her work before the United States Supreme Court. Pat worked on Romer versus Evans, which was just the first decision to strike down an anti-gay ballot initiative, or so we hope. Pat was also the person at Lambda Legal who crafted our amicus brief in the Supreme Court case Troxel versus Granville, a parenting case that helped shape that decision. And finally, Pat is one of the very small team responsible for our victory in Lawrence versus Texas. Pat wrote the liberty argument in the Lawrence versus Texas brief, and that was the argument on which the court gave us the most significant victory of our movement. Lawrence didn't just strike down all remaining laws nationwide that criminalized intimacy between people of the same sex. Lawrence Florence affirmed the equal dignity and humanity of all of us, regardless of sexual orientation. And it made possible the advancement of our marriage work in ways that we almost couldn't dream of back in 2003. Of course, one of Pat's accomplishments, however, may not be as well known. Before Pat joined our staff, when she was on the board of Langdon Legal, she selected Kevin Cathcart as our